Welcome to another episode of the CPG Guys podcast. Our co-hosts, Sri Rajagopalan and Peter V.S. Bond, explore how brands and retailers engage with consumers online, in-store, and everywhere in between. And now, here are Sri and Peter.
Hey everyone, it's PVSB, one of the CPG guys. I'm here with the other CPG guy, the Sultan of SWAT. We're both kind of smarting from our team's dismal performances last night, but it's a new day. That means we can still marshal on to get to the playoffs. It's Saturday, end of summer, Labor Day weekend. We thought we would engage in an episode of LinkedIn Live Rank Punditry, and I can't think of a better person to join us than the rankest of all our friends. He's the host of the Gildenberg Omni Comment, which appears every Thursday on the CPG Guys LinkedIn page. Sri, join me in welcoming Mr. Bryan Gildenberg. Bryan, how are you?
I'm doing great. You could have said I was your top ranked friends rather than the rankest. That might have been a better intro.
My bad. Oops.
Yeah.
So sorry.
He did say he was smarting from the Dodgers loss last night, so he's a little delirious. We
picked our friend who we knew wouldn't be doing anything today. Bryan Gildenberg, how are you?
So everyone, just for purposes of understanding, Sri is going to take over as the master of ceremonies. He's got two topics that he wants us to dig into, and it'll be kind of a free-form conversation. Usually it's us asking our guests the question, but we're going to be providing our own opinion today. So we're also watching the channel on LinkedIn and commentary. So by all means, feel free to chime in as we do that. But as far as I'm concerned, I'm going to pass it over to my dear friend, the Left Coast La La Land CPG guy. Sri, take it away.
Peter, thank you so much. First of all, and most importantly, thank you to all the attendees who have joined us today live. Do remember, this will live as a podcast after this live event is over. You're going to find it on LinkedIn, on the CPG Guys site on LinkedIn. You're also going to find it on Instagram as a full video. You're going to find it posts, likes, reels. Now, you all told us we need to have a TikTok. So we actually have TikTok where we do CPG Guys. Anytime you want to go find out what we're talking about on TikTok, just search for CPG Guys Knowledge Drop. It's that easy. And by the way, the comment section is actually open. So feel free at any point. If you have a question, all you got to do is drop in the comment section over here, and Bryan, Peter, and I will make sure we answer your question. You can also do that once it's posted to LinkedIn and put a comment in with a question, and we'll make sure to respond to that. So we have two awesome topics, but first let me thank both Peter and Bryan today for agreeing to be here live on the LinkedIn live event for the CPG Guys. We're going to start making this a habit. Hopefully we do this at least once a month on a Saturday. That makes it easy for all of you to join in, and it's not a weekday during business hours. We're still trying to figure out the exact timing, but what we'll commit to is you're going to see a CPG Guys LinkedIn live event once a month at least. And so our two topics for today, absolute hot topics. Some I've experienced myself over the pandemic, and I want to truly try and decipher what's going on. The first one is the return of the shopper to the store. I mean, clearly at this stage in the United States, it appears COVID is over. We're getting on planes. We're not wearing masks. We don't need to wear masks. The death rates for COVID are down. Sickness rates for COVID are down. Just infections are down. And it appears has started returning back to where it was in late 2019, early 2020. And that means traffic is coming back in store. I know we're in an inflationary period, so units are not the same, but traffic is definitely in the store. So we're going to hit that topic up and how brands should focus on the in-store model once again, because a lot of us have kind of gone down the digital path very heavily to the point where when I talk to different CPG brands in the industry, that's where all the action capital is going. Is that the right thing to do? So we're going to ask those questions. The second topic we're going to talk about is obviously one of the fastest growing line items on any brand's exercise from a P&L perspective as well as investment perspective. That is the world of retail media. There is no start, no end to the type of questions I can ask, and all of you have on your mind in retail media. But some win, some lose in the space. There's a lot of investments going in. So I'm going to ask both these gentlemen, Peter and Bryan, where should the investments go? What type of investment should go? Is it a shift from media? Is it a shift from trade? Because at the end of the day, checks are written to retailers for this line item. So we're just going to decipher retail media. So let me kick it off first with the store model. So Bryan, I'm going to ask you this question first. And of course, Peter, feel free to chime in. Very simple, Bryan. COVID's over for all practical purposes. Now, of course, there may be another resurgence, but only the Lord knows at this stage.
Yeah.
You can see traffic back in store. I'm a store shopper. Believe it or not, guys, I may be a digital evangelist, but I still go in store a lot. I was at shopping at Whole Foods last night for people we had home. And I will be going, my wife sending me to Ralph's this afternoon. So traffic is definitely back in store. I can see it with my own eyes. I do a lot of store tours in my day job. So Bryan, considering the in-store traffic is back and it's not click and collect, people are browsing aisles and buying things in a grocery store. Should brands redirect a lot of the investments they made in digital back to the in-store model?
Well, the simple answer is of course, but with a caveat. And the caveat basically is the whole setup to the argument, which is that the idea that the world shifted apart from the 10 weeks or so where nobody could leave. I mean, where you literally couldn't leave your house and you couldn't go. The world for the last couple of years shifted way less than people think it did to digital from physical, right? That shift was always overstated. And the recalibration of it back to where the growth rate of online has slowed down a bit is, entirely understandable. And now, as many charts have shown, we're basically back to the same acceleration of e-commerce as a share of consumable spend that you probably would have had at this point without COVID, and basically the share to share, 1 to 1.5 points of share that e-commerce gains, that it's continuing to gain and will continue to gain for the foreseeable future. That being said, 3/4 of everything that's bought in the world is still bought in a store, and well over 80% of everything that's a CPG product in the world is bought in a store. So the overcorrection away from the store, I think, was driven by two things. Number one is the perception that digital was somehow easier to measure, which is a conversation we can talk about throughout all of this. And two, that the way in which you spend money in store has historically been controlled by budgets that are a little more arcane and a little harder for companies to get their head around. And sure, you know this better than I do, right? So, the minute you start to spend money in stores, you get into customer teams and trade budgets and a bunch of things that marketers just don't have their hands on the wheel. And as a result, I think marketers have vastly oversimplified, poorly understood, or ignored what you could do in store. So yes, I think nailing the store is important for a whole bunch of reasons, but most notably and obviously because it's still where most of the purchases happen. And that's going to be true for as long as any of the three of us care about this business. So,
yeah, I think it's kind of important, Peter, to highlight that because I think many brands that I talk with in the universe have gone so deep digital, and that's what they want to chase with their capital, that it needs to be roped back in. Thanks for pointing that out, Bryan. But I want to get your opinion as well, Peter. You have a slightly different lens than Bryan and I do. Bryan and I work very closely with brands every single day. We see it every day. You've actually been on the capability side last 5 years and is one of those that's actually possibly benefiting from the investments on the capital side. How do you feel about reinvesting in the store model away from digital?
Well, I don't think they're mutually exclusive events. And I'll give you the most obvious example is straight from what I do when I'm not podcasting with you. Fetch Reward has built a mobile loyalty platform, but 90% of the activations, the purchase behavior of our users is coming from physical store sales. So we're taking advantage of the fact that everybody walks into the store with one of these. It's a smartphone, right? And we can personalize messages wherever they may be. There are entire companies that are about location-based marketing activities. Certainly our friend Risa at A Key, our friends at InMarket, all of those are capabilities. And I don't think you necessarily have to make that choice, but you do need to make sure that you are addressing the store. We have our friend Catherine Black, who just dropped a CPG Guys knowledge drop on us. It'll be out on social media. But she shared with us that while 89% of grocery sales are still occurring in physical retail, only 14% of personalized activations are store focused. That's what's got to change. We've got to start addressing that aspect of it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're really not taking advantage of the efficiencies. And measurement is important. There's no question about that. But as long as you can target personalization, be able to use traditional test and controls to measure the effectiveness of it, then guess what? Brands are going to start shifting into digital mechanisms that address the store component directly.
Hey, Peter,
Bryan,
can I build on that too? Because I think there's one piece to this, and this would be if we're going to be rank punditrying, this would be one of my punditries, I guess. I think over the next couple of years, people are going to realize that personalized can mean one of two things. It can mean individualized, or it can be meaningful to that person. And I think there's been way too much effort spent on trying to individualize things.
Bryan, there's no question. The term personalization to me is not one-to-one. It is the journey of one-to-all in the direction of one-to-one. But where are we right now? We're somewhere between one-to-many and one-to-few. That to me is personalization.
Yeah, I guess my point being is that I don't think it matters to the recipient of personalization whether it's one-to-one, one-to-many, or one-to-all. What matters is that it's meaningful. And
it has to be relevant. It absolutely has to be relevant.
And I think that what people are going to discover is that stores, with the caveat of, yes, on my mobile phone I can reach people in individualized ways. What the store may be better for are sort of things that are more largely resonant or relevant to more than an individual, right? So the example that popped into my head as we were talking about this is some work we did at Omnicom for Diageo a couple of years ago, where we basically try to demystify the drinks category in store, right? Because people would go in, and people, when they're preparing for a party, didn't like to buy spirits because they didn't know how to make cocktails. So, and that was a big enough use case that all we had to do was put together about 10 different cocktail recipes, promote them through social media and digital. Now, all of a sudden, the person's like, oh, wow, that's speaking to me. It doesn't have to say, I state your name inserted, this is your cocktail. It just has to be meaningful. And I think one of the things that we're going to see is that people are going to understand that if you view personalization through the lens of the person receiving it, you would think about the problem differently than you do as a marketer that's trying to show off and get to one-to-one marketing because it's cool and because you'll win an award at Cannes for it. That's
Bryan, I think every marketer would say they wear the lens of the shopper of the consumer, the shopper, when they actually do business and they try to set up personalization campaigns. Mm-hmm. You and I have been in this industry way too long to know that it's a blended bag. It should be always, the consumer should always win. The consumer is queen. We shouldn't debate that. But I'm going to ask you the second rank punditry question. I'm going to ask you. Sure. I'm going to kick it off with you, Peter, and then Bryan. Your rank punditry is going to be the underlining in italicized 36 font over here. And so, Peter, here's the question. It's a controversial one. The return to store. I think question one we've already answered. Return to store is important. Focus on it. Traffic's in store. I personally will tell you, grocery e-commerce peaked over COVID. Now we're back to the 1-2% growth, 150 basis points as an overall brand ecosystem for your given company or set of brands that you do. As a percent growth, it still might be the only place you can hunt for growth. But be forewarned, you're going to go back to the 150, 200 basis points. So paying attention to the store is relevant. So we've answered that. So let's jump to question two, which is an offshoot of that. Who owns, Peter, the return to the store? So let me break this up, A, B, or C. Brand teams and marketers. So let's just call them marketers. Selling teams in partnership with the retailer, or shopper marketers, which are largely, depending on the organization, a capabilities team.
Shri, I guess it depends upon how the organization is structured, where the budgets are, who controls it. But certainly there's got to be concert happening between the different interested parties. I mean, the shopper marketing person is ultimately the one that traditionally owns the activation budgets at retail, right? They're going to have to use the sales organization calling on those customers to secure the the partnership with the retailer. But to a degree, a lot of the content and again some of the national funding is going to have to go there as well. We're talking a little bit about retail media here, right, Shri? And retail media, there's some interesting stats we've heard, and we've talked about this on the podcast of late. Walmart Connect said that 82% of people who shop physical Walmart stores still do so with their mobile app or the Walmart website open on a mobile browser on their phone. So there is this crossover between people are going to physical stores. And so in that respect, how national brand people are investing ultimately in retail media is going to have an impact upon the in-store experience. And as a result of that, I think that they are also involved in this equation. It's not just the shopper marketer that is going to drive engagement, but I'll certainly defer to Bryan for his thoughts on this.
Well, I work for a bunch of shopper marketing agencies, so take this answer with the appropriate grain of salt. But no, I think the idea around who owns it is, I think to some degree, let's put it this way. The one team that probably shouldn't own it are the brand teams because they just know the least about it. Of the three constituencies you've picked, they're the ones that understand how things work in a store least well. What they will understand is if the objective is to do anything with the brand beyond convert in the moment, they'll have an understanding of what that looks like. That might be better, more interesting, or more refined than a sales team or maybe even a shopper team would. I think shopper teams in the end are the logical teams to own it just because they are the ones that are most fluent in the variety of objectives you would be trying to accomplish in a store environment. Be that build equity, expand category definition, reframe mental availability, highlight physical availability, convert. I think somebody's got to be sitting on top of this that knows how those various levers can and should operate. And I think shopper teams are just the most likely people to know how to do that. And then it just becomes a question of looking at those different budgets you just went through. Clearly, I think in store, bigger things tend to work better than small things, right? So one big thing, one $9 project works better than three $3 ones most of the time, right? So you're going to want to aggregate resources. And what that means is that teams are going to have to get comfortable with the idea that they're going to be contributing resources to something they don't necessarily control. And that is something that most big companies are really, really bad at. And I think that's going to be one of the really interesting processes that unfolds is how do you collaborate internally in a way to create something that can cut through the operational complexity and clutter of the physical store? So it's got to be big. But how do you let someone else captain it that just simply knows more about how to do that than you do? So how do brand teams or perhaps even customer teams in some cases act as a silent partner on things is going to be a very interesting competency.
Shri, a very wise man recently spoke about the concept of vertical versus horizontal in retail in particular. And
who was that?
And I have no idea. But the one salient point he had about it, and there was really only one. Now, there were more than that. But when I think, and Shri, you and I have talked about this, right? There are still reasons, very strong reasons to go to physical retail. Like I still have a problem on the produce side. I have yet to find a retailer that is going to select produce to the quality and experience that I expect, and deal with substitutions in an easy way. But more importantly, you and I've talked about holidays, right? Am I going to go to Amazon and shop for 4th of July? I'm just not, because they're not structured to do that. But guess what? Target has this big back section in the corner that rotates every season, and they've got their Christmas and they got their Thanksgiving and their Halloween, and it just makes it so easy for me. So I think there are a lot of things that retailers are able to do. Look at what Walmart started to do. My goodness, I was at the store down just south of Bentonville a couple of weeks ago, and they've started to do that curated room and all of these different functions, and you scan the QR code and all the items are there and you just go add. My God, there are a lot of things that physical in-store is still just so much better at doing by bringing things together right in front of me. I absolutely love it.
Can I throw in a bit of random punditry for the next 18 months, which is I think 18 months from now, you're going to be reading articles about how the omni-channel retailers have gotten more comfortable competing with Amazon, that they get it and that they've really built and the solution, the problems they know how to solve that Amazon struggles with will be a much bigger part of the overarching narrative.
You know what I see, folks, Amazon, of course, went into grocery a few years ago with the acquisition of Whole Foods, maybe 5 or 6 years ago. I forget exactly when it was. Whole Foods really hasn't grown rapidly since then. And then Amazon has about 50 Amazon Fresh grocery stores. Grocery business is incredibly hard. And it's not given the volume of transactions and the operational nature of the business. So I think you're 100% right, Bryan. I think most retailers in their omni-channel endeavors, especially with the return of the store, which you've already declared in question one is real, will be able to compete with Amazon head-to-head on the digital aspects. May not be so much in the tech innovation aspect, which is Amazon's DNA, just like many other retail's DNA is the operational excellence. So I want to move on to question 3 as traffic returns to the store. And let me start with you, Bryan, this time. And that is assortment related.
Yeah.
COVID obviously changed buyer behavior, shopper behavior, consumer behavior in some areas, possibly for good. And that is with the inflationary trends the way they are, away from home eating or outside eating versus at home consumption has been bent. The psychologists will usually say 18 months is what's required to change a habit. You're trying to build muscle, you're trying to lose weight, gain weight, whatever the case might be. 18 months changes habit. We've been in this habitual environment now for over 2 years and 5 months, let's say 30 months, give or take. So habit has definitely changed. What do you feel about assortment? Are people eating differently? Do they want multi-packs? Do they want flavor packs? Is natural and organic getting better penetration and has a future in the grocery industry? Like, I'm just trying to get a viewpoint on assortment overall. What should brands be thinking of and what should retailers be demanding? I'll give
you 3 predictions that are tied to this. Number 1, I do think, and this is something I've talked about for years, that the problem of the notion of the endless shelf in consumables, and particularly in grocery, is going to be viewed as the somewhat ludicrous idea it always was, with all due respect to people I've had this argument with before. If 90% of everything that's sold, including one you got to watch, right? But if 85 to 90% of consumables are sold through a physical store, and a huge chunk of the e-commerce growth in the U.S. is coming from a platform, i.e. Instacart, that just picks stuff off a physical shelf. You don't have an endless shelf in consumer packaged goods. You have a shelf that actually has more things to do than it used to, because it has to be both a selling shelf and a warehouse for e-commerce until people start to crack the code on dark stores and warerooms and all the other good stuff, which will happen. But in the short to medium term, there's enormous pressure on variation of the shelf because the shelf has to do different things. So you're going to see pressure there too. I think smart companies are going to take advantage of the inflationary environment that we're in to reset category price pack architecture. There's a reason why Instacart went out the other day and bought Eversight, which is one of my favorite businesses on the planet. A guy named Dave Moran who runs that is really smart. But Instacart realizes that the ability to scientifically understand price gaps will help them sell advertising to brands that are trying to trade consumers up in a price disrupted environment to get them to spend a little bit more than they're used to get something better, because they had to spend more on the basic stuff to start with. And I think you're going to read a lot over the next year about how smart companies used inflation to reset the shopper's mental frame for what more premium solutions could cost. I think it's a massive opportunity for brands that no one's paying attention to. I think there's going to be a really big one there. And 3, I think the notion of, I think the pressure on assortment to do something apart from line extend will be phenomenally high. And I just don't think most big brands are prepared for the limits to what a line extension will be able to get in terms of physical shelf space. I would assume that if you're coming up with a flavor variation that accomplishes nothing new for the category's overall economics, but replace some other terrible item, that product's going to be sold online and online only. And you've got to earn shelf space.
And Bryan, before I move over to Peter and kind of get into assortment, when you say line extension, could you give us just some artificial examples of what
lavender flavored anything? New fresh scent, flavor variations, trivial changes in the brand that are aimed at either replacing some other dead item that your brand has on the shelf, or gaining less than 200 basis points of share without growing the category. That to me would be my working definition of a line extension. Those innovations, which are the thing that every assistant brand manager in a large CPG company grows up doing, that stuff isn't going to have a place on the shelf. And that's an enormous challenge, Sri, for a business like the one that you do your day job in, just to figure out what those ABMs are supposed to do if no one's going to put that stuff on the shelf anymore.
Peter, any quick thoughts on assortment?
Yeah, a couple. First, Sri, I absolutely agree with you in terms of breaking habits. I think that the pandemic broke a lot of habits. I don't know that even at this point that new habits have necessarily been formed. I think we're still feeling our way through it. And price pack architecture is interesting in that consumers, the pandemic forced us to try a lot of new products that we might not necessarily have done so because of supply chain constraints. And so you're right that brands have had an opportunity to start thinking about how they're going to do that. And retailers are similarly, they want the products, particularly the big ones, they want product sizes that are slightly different from everyone else's, so that they can create a little bit of a distance in terms of the straight up comparison, which consumers do. Can they go and calculate it at the unit or the the equivalized unit cost? Sure, they can, but a lot of shoppers don't bother doing that, and so they benefit from that. So I still think that there's a lot going on in this space, and I think you're right that line extensions are crazy. But Bryan, when you say it may be over, I just keep walking by the 8 to 12 foot section of Oreos in every grocery store that has every variation. Listen to our dear friends, Christina Marinucci, Francesca Hahn, Stephen Gown. Listen, we love you guys. And I love all these variations. But, that is probably the quintessential example of SKU proliferation going all out there, right?
I'm jacked for like the 5-blade version of the stuffed Oreo, though. That I'm fired up for. Like if they just keep
the Gillette Oreo.
Yeah, so it's basically just like a marshmallow inside of an Oreo crack.
I apologize. I got to rope you both back in.
Oh, we're just going to start. Yeah, we're going to.
Overjoyous Oreo love here. Back to exactly that very topic, which is I like your 30-second, 60-second opinion on this one. You mentioned line extensions because I'm going to move over exclusively into retail media. And
hey, Sri.
A question from one of our participants today, but the question is a straightforward one before I get into the retail media question from a participant, and that is, Bryan, you referred to line extensions, huge opportunity. I will not argue. I know it is. What is the role of innovation in that scenario? True category shaping innovation if line extensions are the aha?
Well, I mean, I think it's a cliche to say that fewer, bigger innovations is probably a good idea. But I think I also think that at some point, companies are going to need to redeploy their innovation bandwidth towards things that can reset the economics of their category in ways that are more genuinely accretive. So yes, putting the consumer at the center, she's the queen and all that, but we've got to find a greater percentage of the innovation budget has to be allocated to things that can basically allow our business to continue to make more money in a price neutral or price challenging environment for the core stuff, right? So, and in essence, every CPG company is going to have to look more like a hardlines company, an electronics company, or a fashion company. You're going to need a cascade of innovation that starts with things that are high margin with the assumption not that I'm going to expand that margin over time by reducing cost and keeping the price point the same, but that the margin I get when I launch is the highest margin I'm ever going to see. And that margin will decline over time, and that my innovations are meant to reset the margin of the category, not for growth. It's a real rethinking of what innovation is supposed to do, from just being about growth to being about margin expansion as well. I think that's going to be a very, very big topic over the next 12 to 24 months.
Peter, anything from your side on this? Innovation?
No, I agree. Listen, innovation is the lifeblood of growth for so many brands, and it's the way they command the attention of the retail customers. It gets them excited about it. It's where they put a lion's share of their marketing dollars in the hopes that one of their innovation products breaks through and gives them that step change growth in otherwise fairly mature categories. So I tend to agree with Mr. Gildenberg here. Shri, before we move on to the last question, I flashed this up on the screen.
Yeah, Peter, I'm jumping to that one. I'm jumping to that one next. So first, let me welcome Kerem Mazouzi to the live broadcast today. Kerem, thank you for asking a very important question, which is going to shift us over from the question about the return to store to shopper marketing. Well, they're not mutually exclusive. Retail media is the next topic here. So we're going to hit up 4 questions on retail media. And the first one Kerem asks us is, how do you think shopper marketers should collaborate with media agencies to maximum ROI of retail media? Let me give a little bit more context, because that's been on my mind as well. The way retail media is shaping up these days, a lot of self-service is being offered up. In a previous world, in the in-store model, media agencies had a big role to play in the outcome in-store. And even in the Google media, Facebook media, social media, but retail media, more and more, you can see a lot of self-service being offered up. So what is that intersection? And should shopper marketers really be depending and leaning in on people who know their brands pretty well, which is media agencies? So let's do a 1-2 punch. Why don't I start with you first, Peter? Then I'll ask Bryan, because I know this is his forte and day job.
Well, let's talk a little bit about shopper marketers and investing in retail media in particular. I think in the past we've talked a lot about spreading your investment, making sure you're playing wherever your shoppers are. The fact of the matter is that everybody is introducing their own retail media platform, but like Orwell would say, all animals are equal, but some are more equal than others. And I think it's pretty clear and obvious to say that the likes of Amazon Ads and Walmart Connect and Target Roundel are still, and Kroger Precision Marketing are still the big players. Now we've got some new ones on. I'm not saying, we've had 2 guests on from Albertsons Media Collective. We had Evan Havorkin. We now have Claire Wyatt coming up to talk analytics, and obviously we've had Instacart with Ryan Mayward. But the big guys are still where it's going. I'm still not necessarily convinced that investing in some of the ad platforms that are in the drug channel and even the value channel, right, are necessarily where I'm going to do. Is it possible I can get a good return there? Sure. But as a percentage of my overall return, they're still going to be fairly insignificant. So the customer teams, as much as they want to get involved in this, I still think there needs to be coordination from headquarters, because they're going to make the decisions about where the big wins are going to take place.
Right. Two things. One is to build on Peter's observation, which is like, look, well, actually, let me, because Kerem, I think that's the question companies are asking. I'm not sure it's the one they should be asking. I think that question is backwards, actually, which is, why in the world would you think that a media agency staffed entirely by a group of people who really don't understand anything about the commercial interplay between your brand and a retail ecosystem should be responsible for what is going to become a significant part of the P&L that you have with your largest and most important trading partner, right? So, you mentioned Walmart earlier, right? The Walmart relationship for a CPG company is the single most important thing that a company has in terms of delivering profits to shareholders, right? So at some basic level, I think often this whole conversation gets lost in a very media-centric view of the world, which is just candidly wrong. The most important thing about, a big CPG company's relationship with Walmart is not its media network. It just isn't. It's not true. The most important thing is that it is the most profitable channel of distribution for consumer packaged goods God ever invented. And that most of the money we're going to make as a business is derived from that commercial relationship, and how we peel that back, right? That's really important. So I think rather than saying, how should shopper marketing agencies collaborate with their media partners, the question might be better asked is, how should your media partners collaborate with people that know the retail ecosystem to optimize retail media most effectively?
What a powerful comment, Bryan. So I want to repeat what Bryan said, because it's a question I'm asking myself.
Yeah.
How should shopper marketers, media agencies partner with those that call on the retailers, aka in this world that would be the selling ecosystem, so that you can deliver maximum value for the retailer as well as for the consumer at the end of the day? Because let's be clear, consumer is queen at the end of the day. What a powerful statement. You're going to see me highlight that, folks, those of you following live, as well as seeing this post. I have listed all the questions we've asked Peter and Bryan here in the comment section of LinkedIn, so you can go ahead and see what questions we asked and dive right into it in the post podcast or the video you'll watch right here. I want to thank Kiran for asking that very important question, because it's been top of mind for me, and I think it's a confusion in the industry. So I have two more on retail media, and I think they're fairly important. Peter kind of alluded to it with his comment earlier that he used the animal theory, some are larger and may win, and Darwin's theory, as well as the survival of the fittest theory. So in the ecosystem of retail media, there are large ones, small ones, new ones. Congratulations to Albertson's Media Collective, who we've already had on the show. We've recorded 2 episodes. We got a few more coming up. And Albertson's Media Collective was the first on the CPG guys to hit up true incrementality, iROAS, as the metric. And, Bryan, you've done how many comments on this one? Is retail media mature or immature? Should brands really be looking hard at their marketing mix and saying, I got to lean in heavy into retail media versus traditional Google? Notice I'm not even saying offline. Google, social, all other forms of digital path to purchase opportunities.
Yeah, well, I think it's immature, clearly, and just because and that's not a knock on anything. It's just it's evolving, right? So the step change in capabilities you're witnessing over a 3 to 6 month period across all of these platforms don't suggest something that's mature, right? Mature things don't change that fast. So it's clearly immature, and I think you've got 2 things going on in the digital media space. One is that for a variety of reasons, Facebook, largely due to IDPA and the Apple stuff and the privacy world. Google, because people have just gotten frustrated with having to scroll through 17 ads to get to an answer. Those platforms are to some degree becoming less effective, where they're not increasing in effectiveness as fast as retail media is. So spend is going to gravitate to retail media if you're a responsible media planner on its own, because retail media is improving and your other forms of digital media are not. So therefore, it's going to earn more spend. I think at a media planning level, you're going to start to look more to retail media. And I think this is the tension point that you're trying to solve, I'm trying to solve, we're all trying to solve, is that there's a need for these media platforms to deliver media style results. And that's not just in terms of do they work, it's how they work and how they deliver knowledge about what those results are. What's the information I get back? So all that's happening. That's all super true. I think the other piece, though, which is going to become obvious really quickly, is that media buyers don't like small audiences for the most part. They like big ones. And Peter, that was your point. Basically, it's like, I think any of these media audience networks that don't have national scale either have to do something super specific, or they have to deliver an ROI, which is demonstrably higher and more provable than everybody else. I think that's why you've got Albertsons working as hard as they are on the analytics side. They're trying to get to a point where we're not as big as Kroger, but if we can prove ROI more effectively and more coherently, we can command share of budget. So those are some thoughts.
Yeah, being a late mover has given Albertsons Media Collective the definite advantage of being a late mover in retail media to jump straight to IRO as the metric to solve for. So, Peter, I want to first welcome Stephen Cohen. Thank you for joining us on today's live broadcast. And Peter, he has a question. He agrees with Bryan on the shopper media marketing question that I asked just a little while ago, and where does the partnership sit with the agency, et cetera. And then the subsequent question I asked, is it enough to warrant an investment? Peter, what do you think about separating strategy and budget and the execution? Does one belong closer to the selling side, which is the execution, and the strategy and budget sits in a central organization, which is really the marketing organization, or should all this collapse on the selling organization now that it's back in, the action's coming back in store, really own it end to end? Thoughts?
I guess from my perspective, it really depends upon the expertise of the sales arm that's doing the execution. If they don't have the skill set to activate in a digital world, then to build strategy in a digital world, then they're kind of left with doing the execution. You really do need it. We've been down this road before. Does it reside in this group or that group? It's really where you have centers of excellence. Capabilities are going to drive who controls the strategy. But the execution at the end of the day is ultimately going to fall into the sales organization, whether they're bleeding into the strategy. Really depends upon whether you've built a center of excellence within that community. That would be my thought.
Yeah, I think execution execution generally speaking is better if it lives in one place rather than multiple places, just because you avoid duplication of effort and you avoid doing dumb things. So
I don't think either of you answered my question though, which is where should that execution lie? We'd love your opinion. Is it in the selling side, which you mentioned, Bryan, is closest to the retail partnership, or is it still a capability?
I think if it's a straight up media buy and you're looking for, if it's part of the media mix, the execution is probably better done by the person that's executing the whole media side of things. But that gets you into a mechanical question about, because usually whoever executes it gets paid for it, and then that creates a whole bunch of tension issues. So clearly there are benefits to having one party executing everything that looks like media spend, but the degree to that's got to be coordinated at a strategy and budget level is super high. So I always worry when I see that question is usually about, how do I get to be the one that gets paid for it, not about anything that's particularly strategic. So that's my only fear with that question is it can take you down a rabbit hole that isn't driving business value. It's driving value of somebody's budget.
Speaking of rabbit holes, let me ask the last question of the day. Of course, spending any that comes in from our listeners. And that question is a straightforward one. Given most brands have seen and retailers have seen a shift in the digital nature of their business. Again, I'll be the first one to say, I believe the digital business is peaking from a growth perspective. It's not that it's not going to grow. It's going to get its 100, 200 basis points of growth year over year. Probably the fastest growing ecosystem within any brand ability that's in a 1P model versus a D2C model, but it's peaking. The growth is definitely peaking off. In that sort of world, folks, digital skill sets, including especially focus on retail media, build versus buy.
From a retailer perspective, you mean build your own
retail or brands?
Well, I mean, from a retail perspective, there's elements you're going to want to build and there's elements you're going to want to buy. Like I don't think I need to build. I don't think I want to build my own inventory of advertising content.
No, let me just ask the question again, Peter.
Okay.
The question is a skill set, human capital question.
Sorry. No, I think you have to build, and the reason you have to build is because, particularly in this full employment economy, going out and finding the people is increasingly difficult. I mean, Shri, that's why our dear friend Andrea Lay of Illume Group has built the model of her new business, which is exactly the fact that I've got to take the people that I already have and upskill them, because I'm never going to be able to satisfy the demand I have by trying to go out and find people that are getting 5 or 6 job offers for their skill set. And I'm just going to be trying all day long in an effort and futility to do that. It's much easier for me to find people who are loyal to my company, who've been with us, understand, want to stay with the company, and just upskill them and give them the capability so that they can succeed in this new demand capabilities.
I would echo that sentiment with two tiny builds. One of which is that I think if you're not building talent that's going to be relevant for the new world, you're probably not doing the work the right way anyway. So, because you're still doing the work in the old silos, and you should probably relook at the experiences that people are having day in and day out. Because if you're not building talent that's going to be ready to lead this new world in 5 years, chances are you're not doing the work right now. So I think that's a bigger question than just buy versus build. It's really around how you're doing the work and what you're developing. Secondly, and y'all are both baseball fans, right? So, I mean, Peter, the Dodgers have tried as hard as they can to buy their way to success. And some of that works, but some of the Dodgers' most important contributors are homegrown talent, right? There's no way that the cost structure of a modern publicly traded entity can buy all the talent it needs. It just won't be able to do that. Like, there's just, even the Yankees and the Dodgers, God love you guys, can't buy all the talent they need to win a World Series. You got to home grow some of it as well. So.
I don't think we can debate that. The Yankees have been trying for quite a bit of time now, and it hasn't worked in a decade. So, and it didn't work this year. It worked in the first half. Complete collapse in the second half.
Dude, look behind me if you want to see an example of a team that doesn't work.
There we go. And maybe the worst record in baseball, close to where the Kansas City Royals are, et cetera, in the second half. But do you think? Question of the day.
Happens when you only build too. I think selective buying makes sense. Like, I don't think you can only build.
Question of the day, because this one both Peter and I agree on. We're both Giants fans. Can the Giants buy their way into a world championship? They didn't the last two times they did.
I think they need to buy their way into actually getting to the playoffs.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think this Giants and Patriots fans this year are concerned about a world championship may not be consuming a lot of our mental energy.
I want to see 150 plus pass yards per game. I think that's the goal this year, and close to 80 rush yards or more rushing. That's a total of 230 plus yards. I think it'll be an achievement, considering most of last year, the first half, we had 50 yards total. All that said, folks, I want to thank both you, Bryan, and Peter for giving us your morning on a Saturday. Folks listening and watching, as I mentioned before, we will commit to doing a LinkedIn Live here on the CPG Guys at least once a month, where we'll share some rank punditry. It's I promise you next time you will know at least a week in advance when or which dates we pick. We're going to hopefully try and publish a calendar 12 months out for when we're going to do this, so you can plan to be part of this. Don't be strangers, though. As this comes up on the LinkedIn post, feel free to drop questions then. We'll do our best to answer them. Y'all know how to get a hold of us. If you need a question answered, just get a hold of us. And the three of us are happy to answer. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us today. To all our listeners, you want to, the best way to track us down, see all of our content, go to a browser, type cpgguys.com. Hopefully this conversation added value. Do follow us. How you can do that? Type CPG Guys and simply hit the follow button. And Peter has some wisdom to close the show.
Just the fact that I know our good friend Todd Hassenfeld has asked about data clean rooms and the impact that's going to have. We'll talk about that in a future episode, but it is very top of mind. We talk about this all the time. Retailers have these powerful walled gardens. What's going to think back to something Bryan said, what's going to make that much more digestible and acceptable to brands that are hungry for 1P data is the ability to access that data through clean rooms and do targeting outside of the retail media platforms. When that happens, wow, people are going to be pretty excited about that, and it'll help compensate some of that.
Todd, I want to first of all welcome you and thank you for joining and following along today's LinkedIn Live. I also do want to point out, Todd, that we address clean rooms pretty deeply in a previous episode. The best way for you to actually access that, we did that with Rosemary Hua. And all you got to do is go to cpgguys.com. When the podcast listing shows up automatically on the homepage, when you do that, just hit view all, and in the search bar, type Rosemary and her episode will pop up. She addresses clean rooms head up. In the industry, this is largely a buzzword. For those of us that are really close to it, It is the future of analytics. As powerful as 10 years ago when we were referring to big data. It's literally that earth shattering. You can do things that you can't do before. But guess what, folks? Folks like Bryan, me, and Peter have to champion the heck out of it for all of you in the industry. You'll hear a lot more about clean rooms and so much more on the CPG Guys. It's a wrap. Thank you for joining us. More to come, as always.
The content in this podcast episode is provided for general informational purposes only. By listening to our episode, you understand that no information contained in this episode should be construed as advice from CPG Guys LLC or the individual author, hosts, or guests, nor is it intended to be a substitute for research on any subject matter. Reference to any specific product or entity does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by CPG Guys LLC. The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. The views expressed by CPG Guys LLC do not represent the views of their employers or the entity they represent. CPG Guys LLC expressly disclaims any and all liability or responsibility for any direct, indirect, incidental, special, consequential, or other damages arising out of any individual's use of, reference to, or inability to use this podcast or the information we present in this podcast.